to FESIG, the Free Energy Special Interest Group, where science meets spirituality in the quest for truth and knowledge to free humanity and transform this planet into a paradise.
Hi everyone, hi. Welcome to Physics 119th meeting. Today is the 6th of December, and we are here together with brilliant two speakers for this meeting. Tom Sidney Bushnell, or Tom Numbers, has just finished the first session, and we are going to start the second session right away. So bear with me, folks, while I call up the agenda for this meeting, so you will see clearly what is afoot. Now, I'm going to share screen now. There you go. So we have today our co-chairs. Well, my name is Crystal Gore. I'm the founder of FESIG. We have co-chairs, Dr. Fres Frezel, Pontus Hafscher, and James Rink, if he's present. Sometimes he's just too busy and I can't hop in. He did ask me, though, whether there's a meeting today. Certainly, I did tell him. So let me introduce Pontus Hafscher is the head of R&D at FESIG. And Dr. Fres Frezel is the head teacher, innovator for FESIG. James is just at the helm with us. Today, we are having this two sessions. The first session speaker was Tom Sidney Bushnell, aka Tom Numbers, who decodes making connections using words and converting them to numbers. And you can find his recording once we publish it in a couple of weeks' time in our YouTube channel. So you can catch up with the first session if you've missed it. And now we're going on to the second session, where we have Kevin Orlowski speaking about magnetic energy. And he is a magnetic energy researcher and development consultant whose journey with magnetic energy technology started in the 70s. And now I'm going to read to you his bio before he picks up the microphone. Before I do that, I just wanted to tell you that you can know all about us if you go into our website, truevisionofpeace.com/physig.html. And if you want to write to me with some ideas or suggestions or collaboration, write to Crystal at truevisionofpeace.com. And our channels, our video channels are Odyssey, BitChute, and YouTube. We got 3 different channels. And then if you want to interact with us, join us at our Telegram group, FESIG_group. All right. Thank you so much for your patience here. I'm going to start right away by introducing Kevin. Kevin Orlowski, magnetic energy researcher and development consultant, speaks about the development or use of magnetic energy technology principles and general information. He can cover mini-grow magnet engineering analysis, how the coils are connected, magnetic coupling, magnetic pulse generation cycle, magnetic current motor, magnetic pump, Romac generator, power transmuter, magnetic piston, counter-rotating magnetic unit, magnetic energy pulses, magnetron motors. So if you're interested in any of these topics that I've just mentioned, you can just ask him these questions at the Q&A later after his presentation. He said, I started working on magnetic energy technology with my father when I was a child, and I continue to explore its potential to the present day. As a teenager, I had paranormal spiritual experiences that changed my outlook on humanity, the world, and the universe. It became very clear to me at a young age that magnetic energy was the synthesis of science and spirituality with countless parallels. Today, I work as an engineering consultant on a variety of cutting-edge technological projects that impact water, energy, agriculture, mining, medicine, entertainment, and more. I have come to believe that some level of ascension is destined for humanity, and magnetic energy will play a critical role in the process. Well, magnetic energy can revolutionize our world by providing unlimited clean energy and unlimited resources for living. As this technology replaces our conventional technology, we will transition into a world that is free of pollution, free of scarcity, and free of disease. People will be able to thrive in every environment while maintaining perfect harmony with nature. Well said, Kevin. Now over to you. Thank you so much for gracing our platform with your presentation.
Thank you all so much for having me on. Isn't it synchronistic that it's show 119 and that's Tesla, and we're going to be talking a lot about Tesla technology basically. And I just think that's so ironic, and you know, these synchronicities in the universe just cannot be denied. I love when stuff like that happens. So just a disclaimer, I am going to be talking about extremely unconventional information. Okay, so, and it's even unconventional for the people in the free energy area. Also, any devices, any technology that I reference are strictly being used in field testing at this point. So I'm not going to be trying to sell anything to anyone. Now that may change, but that all depends on clearance and everything, because we have too many government connections and everything. So everything is at this point is strictly under contractual field testing. And so there's a lot of IP and stuff wrapped up in all of that. So I'll give a quick background, because this group is so knowledgeable already, and it's like we could jump right in, and especially the slides that you guys were already showing are almost at the heart of what I'm going to talk about. But I'll do a quick background just to get it going. So when I was a child, my dad was working with a guy named Rory Johnson in the Chicago area on a magnetic energy engine that was 480 horsepower, and they had several of these engines running in vehicles day and night. They had $500 million in investing money going. My dad was a development engineer at Armored Greyhound, and he took one of the engines to the Greyhound board and said, hey, listen, look what I've got. We can put this in buses, and you guys can be the revolutionary bus company of the world. And he was incredibly naive, incredibly ignorant of how the system worked at that point. He was just trying to do something to help humanity, blah, blah, blah. So he brought it to the board of Greyhound. All hell basically broke loose. Rory Johnson was found dead. Government agents showed up. They took sledgehammers to the engines that they wanted to destroy. They confiscated the ones that they wanted to keep. They took all of the paperwork, all of the lab equipment, everything. So that started him on this journey, this obsession with magnetic. Well, at that point, he really didn't have a name for it. He didn't even call it magnetic technology yet, or magnetic energy technology. It was more like a free energy engine to them at that point. I mean, they knew it was magnetic. They knew it was magnetic in nature, but it wasn't until the 80s when something crazy started happening in our lives, and we basically, for lack of a better word, a relationship started with higher beings. We at the time, we felt like they were angelic beings. These are beings of light that would communicate with us, visit, they would give us information, and they basically said, we're going to tell you about what you've been working on and what's really going on. And so they really presented us with an entire model of the universe and how things function according to their knowledge and their expertise. And that led into the development of different types of units and the different types of technology and everything. And so this is in the area of like anti-gravity, teleportation. It's free energy in the sense that this is an etheric magnetic process that harnesses that energy, puts it to work, and then lets it go back into the system. So it's tapping an unlimited source of energy. People call it the 0 point. There's all kinds of names for it. In conventional terms, the area of sciences that might be the most similar to maybe like scalar physics kind of starts encroaching on the magnetic model. Maybe quantum physics or quantum mechanics. There's a lot of principles in that overlap in this model. So they presented a lot of information to us, and on different areas of life and different topics, and then of course on the technological principles. Now, what you guys what you showed on those slides, and the toroidal fields, and the number analysis, the excursion and excursion of energy, etheric magnetic energy into a system, all of this exactly relates to how these units function and how they harness an etheric magnetic energy and then put it to work and then put it back into a system. So the etheric field, if you will, is relatively neutral in this model. Now, the reason we say it's relatively neutral is because there's always encoding. There's always something being encoded. Very, very rarely is there going to be a truly pure neutral energy that we will harness. So the key to this is, as we generate neutral pulsing magnetic fields that create a toroidal expression of energy around the unit, that field, and we'll get into the dynamics of what we are doing with that and the dynamics of the geometry of that. But that field, then with a powerful vortex coming through that torus system, that taps the etheric field, and it taps it at very specific pulse rates and very specific resonant frequencies, if you want to use more conventional terms, resonant frequencies. Now, you can talk about like electric scalar potential and like things like magnetic vector potential and those types of like conventional terms, and I'm okay with that, and especially to the degree that we are applying a numerical analysis to the torus. But the point with the units, though, is if you imagine, and Tesla said the same type of thing, and it's exactly how we picture these units. You've got to imagine the field manifestation that the hardware creates. Okay, so let me get into a couple of the dynamics. So in almost every situation, we will have some sort of torus. You will have a torus and a counter rotating torus. Okay, so we're already at two different levels of technology now, or two different types of like toroidal expressions. Now, the pulse rate of the torus, the magnetic pulse rate of the torus, will determine its impact, its etheric draw, its expression in our physical world. So the pulse rate is very critical. The resonant elemental signatures that we add to the pulsing field are also extremely critical. So every torus expression is different. Every unit has a different expression. There are different elements that contribute their resonant signatures to that torus, to that field. And that is so important because as we control, if you want to say that, as we basically infiltrate the magnetic fields with certain elemental signatures, that creates our ability to create attract fields to what we need to attract. So like a common expression of that in a unit would be, we're very interested in our ability to attract and release diamagnetic, paramagnetic, and ferromagnetic materials. Now, why is that? Because you cannot, in this model, you can have straight up magnets that are trying to run a unit, and you can try to put magnets on repel and all that, but that doesn't really work in this model because there's a lot of issues with that. There's a lot of issues with magnetic holdback and magnetic vectors and interference. So what we do typically is we will use diamagnetic and paramagnetic materials that can take on a charge and release the charge instantaneously. And that's one of the principles that really drives high horsepower units. And so like the original units that were in the vehicles running, they had 480 horsepower, and they did it because we were able to basically create instantaneous attract and release fields in paramagnetic and diamagnetic materials. And that allows for incredible torque. So that's just a fundamental principle. Now, here's the thing. All of the dynamics in these units, all of the principles involved in this magnetic model have spiritual connections. They are deeply connected to life, to the human body, to the functioning of the universe, to the functioning of the planet, to everything that's around us. And so it's very important to understand that the magnetic energy and spirituality, they are the synthesis the culmination of that magnetic technology is perfectly linked to spirituality. And partly how that looks in terms of like ascension is the huge role that water plays in this model. So like a couple of these units like I have up here, like this one right here, this is a magnetic water pump. And what this does is this utilizes what we would call neutral flowing magnetic current. And it takes that current and it tracks that current into that rotor that has alternating fields, and then converts that so they're temporarily polarized to allow for basically for continuous rotation. It's an attract and release model, but it changes the water. So we are talking about a very high level of entrainment in the water, if you've heard that word, entrainment. You've got to see, I don't know if you can see it, but I'll just talk about it. We've got a 6-pointed star configuration on this rotor, and it's very significant. And like, I'm sure you're all very familiar with like Dr. Emoto's work, and like Veda Austin's work. And so think about for a second, when you have sacred geometrical expressions in that water, like when they take the droplets of water and they'll say words, or they'll like try to like put an intention in it or whatever, they'll flash freeze it and then take, you know, basically pictures of that. And you see the geometry that forms. That is so fundamental to this, because every geometric expression, if you imagine the geometry in rotation and you imagine it pulsing and you imagine it at certain pulse rates, now whether it's a 7-pointed, 8-pointed, 9-pointed star, or a 6-pointed star, it could even be 5-pointed, it doesn't matter, because what we're doing is if you have the pulse rate that matches this signature of the sacred geometry, you create an etheric draw. So the universe functions through the sacred geometry, through the sacred ratios, through the Fibonacci sequence. All of that comes into play in these units because we are harnessing sacred geometrical field expressions, okay? And so that's very critical to this. So when you have like a unit like this, all of that water that goes through, any water that goes through that pump is now entrained in what we would call a neutral magnetic field. Now, the key to this is we are interrupting gravity. And so in this model, gravity is not a function of mass. Gravity is a function of an etheric magnetic circuit. And that circuit varies with every planet, with every star. There's slight differences. There's slight resonant differences. There's differences in strength, but there's always a torus of a field that forms around like a planet that's in rotation, like our planet Earth, for example. And the outer side of that torus, and you would say it's like on the outer edge of the ionosphere, has an etheric magnetic draw in it. That, and you can see, like, if you look at the, like how you guys are mapping out the torus and the numbers of the torus, you're looking at like vector points. And like, so you're looking at like magnetic vector points and the expression of those points and what happens in that toroidal field. And the energy coming through that field moves at a random sequence. So like the etheric energy is generally neutral, and the excursion or incursion of it into a system happens through a random sequence. So as that, if you want to even to make it simplified, the outer edge of that torus, the energy coming through that will be attracted to the interior of the Earth, or the interior of any toroidal field, like in a unit. It's attracted to that center as the movement is coming through the torus, and it's counter rotating. It's attracted through that, and at that point, at that center point of the torus, then you have this. You could say it's a vacuum, but it's a pressure. But it's a vacuum pressure draw. So the whole system works on pressure flow. So you have an etheric pressure that is always coming through to our system, and there's a pressure that happens with that. That pressure is, in this model, it would be what creates earthquakes, what creates volcanoes, what instigates storms, what it could be like anything. So you have a pressure from the outer ionosphere to a pressure from the inner part of the Earth. As that flows through, that that gravitational expression is a push-pull expression that at a very, you want to call it a quantum level or a subatomic level, this is an energy that is moves in vortices, and it influences everything in its path, essentially everything in its path, at a very specific pulse rate, around 21,000, people would say kilohertz, but it's not really, because it's more like 21,000 neutral magnetic pulses per second. And it influences everything at a quantum level. And that's why when you spin certain things or you pull certain devices, if you can cancel out either action, the push or the pull of that action, you will alleviate the gravity. You can cancel out the gravity. You can make the gravity completely repelling the object. You can make the gravity more intense, however you work with that pulse rate. Now, as soon as you change the gravity of water, so this water leaves the well through a vortex, it is attracted to the surface of the well. Now, at the same time, it is emitting a signal that goes way down into the earth. It's connecting the ionosphere to the center of the earth, this type of unit. That's exactly what it's doing. Now, because the vortex has an upward expression, you can have a very shallow well, like let's say it's a well that's maybe 50 feet deep, but the water table doesn't start, you can't even get a well in that area for 5,000 feet. It doesn't matter, because it attracts water from so far below the surface, it attracts it below the plates. So it creates shallow wells that attract the water, and then the water moves up to the surface. The water has had a gravitational influence on it. Now, partly why that's really important is because the water is now susceptible to intention, impression, formulation, and encoding at a much higher level. Once it has been exposed to a neutral pulsing magnetic field, this water is fully entrainable. So like some of the field testing, for example, that we have going on right now has water that is encoded that tells plants to grow hardier with less water. It basically encodes against any kinds of fungus, any types of things that would hurt the plants. It's so you can do all of these things that are revolutionary for agriculture. It's also revolutionary for medicine. But here's what's really important about it. It's revolutionary for ascension. When a person is exposed to this type of high vibratory water that has been encoded with sacred geometrical patterns and neutral magnetic encoding, it changes their consciousness. And so this is why not just our company and companies like ours, but other companies around the world that are aware of this are fully intent on entraining water around the world with this type of technology, with devices that will just sit in the water anywhere. It can be in reservoirs, it can be in lakes, it can be in rivers, it can be in oceans, whatever it is, underground water, ground tables, because as you entrain the water, you entrain life. So this is what we would call technologically enhanced ascension. And it's not about trying to control anything. So keep in mind, I wouldn't like recommend putting a polarity into that water that tries to control people. Okay. This is empowering the neutral, the higher consciousness, the neutral energy of water, so that, because every person has a unique, customized path to ascension. So it's not my job, it's not anybody's job, it's not any of the scientists I work with, it's not our job to say, this is how you ascend. This is the correct belief system, or this is the correct religion. That's not our job at all. Our job is to provide a neutral perspective of empowerment and ascension that will enhance that own individual's path on their own path to ascension, if that makes sense. So it's technologically enhanced ascension. And it's vital in so many ways, because not only does it completely, this other device that you can see right here, this is a water purifier, and it can provide desalinization through magnetic technology at an extremely low cost. It's fully scalable. All the units are fully scalable. The units in the background are some of the units that run these type of units, but they're scalable. And so not only does it purify any toxin out of water, including radioactive material, and it can also be used for desalination, it also provides the entrainment of the water that optimizes it for agriculture, for growth, for feeding animals, for feeding humans, for feeding plants, for everything. So, and again, it's a vortex. It creates a mighty vortex of water in counter-rotating magnetic vortices that are pulsing at very specific pulse rates that are designed to basically speak to the water, communicate with the water. In this model, we would say water is one of the closest expressions that we have on our planet to an etheric connection. Water is so close to an etheric connection that it responds immediately to magnetic encoding. So and the fact that we're full of water ourselves, that everything in nature, like water is so fundamental to life, but it's also, as we are moving, as the planet is moving into, there are rays coming to our planet that are relatively new, and it's being monitored, and high velocity, high energy cosmic rays that have a different type of vibration than have been seen in conventional physics before. The first thing this high energy, and some people will call it ascension energy, is entering into our solar system. And now keep in mind, this is a solar system phenomenon. Everything that happens within the heliosphere of our sun is subjected to what we are working on and to what others are working on. It's all part of the same process because the interconnectivity that we have with everything inside of that heliosphere is undeniable. Partly because we're all being subjected to the same resonant frequency, the dominant resonant frequency of that gravitational circuit that the sun is producing. And that circuit influences everything in its path. Now, each planet has its own gravitational circuit that provides a degree of shielding from the sun circuit. But it doesn't matter because at that subatomic level, it's fully measurable that we're still being subjected to that circuit. So everything we do on our planet impacts the rest of the solar system and beyond. Some of the huge warnings that we were given from these beings were that back when nuclear testing started, they contaminated the magnetic streams that leave our solar system and go to other solar systems and beyond. So that became just an instant problem overnight with countless solar systems. That you have to think of this in terms of, it's a whole different model of the universe, and like in terms of like quantum entanglement and how this energy, once it leaves what we would call our physical dimension and enters back into a higher dimensional stream, it moves instantaneously to the next system, then it drops down, then it does its thing, then it goes back up. So it's almost like hitting a transformer and then being re-accelerated back into the system. So that happens very fast. We are in the magnetic world, we are so close to our stellar neighbors. They're a blink of an eye away in this world, in this technology, and even in the spaceship type of technology, the anti-gravitic technology that we're given, the ability to travel through the stars unattract. Everyone is very, very closely connected from different systems. And so that contamination that is happening as a result of changing the resonant frequencies of elements that occur naturally on this planet, and primarily through nuclear testing and nuclear anything to do with like basically nuclear power plants, the few hundred nuclear power plants around the world, all of that produces contamination in the system. Now, here's the thing that I don't like to talk about, and I just did a video on this, but I don't like to talk about it because it's a very hard thing for me to say in the free energy community as well. But it's that the way electricity is being produced on our planet right now, and it has been produced for decades, causes a huge problem in resonant frequency for the planet and the ionosphere and the ozone layer and everything. So part of the reason why that is because when you force the process of electricity and you have a hot conductor, you immediately are connected to an ionospheric ozone layer type of draw that doesn't know really what to do with that system. So you're essentially, what you're doing is you're stealing free electrons from our environment without any direct way of replenishing them. And so Tesla knew this, other people knew this, and we certainly were told the same information. If you have to use electricity, what we need to transition to, or what humanity should transition to, would be what Tesla used to call cold electricity, which is closer to like a magnetic current, like a neutral magnetic current. And what it does is it works on demand. So when you resonate a conductor, like let's say you resonate a copper wire at a certain magnetic frequency, what you're doing essentially with that copper wire is you're replicating it over and over and over and over and over and over, millions times a second. And when you do that, because of the nature of copper, you can then, if you need to, you can then take the electrons from that process and you can use them on demand. So nothing's being forced through the conductor. It is cold electricity that responds to a reaction. So once you do that, there's no degradation in voltage over distance. So do you see like the electric vector potential changes? So in conventional physics terms, we would change the potential to now the entire conductor is essentially, it's magnetically resonating at the proper frequency, making the electrons available through the entire conductor without it getting hot. And without it expending, without it drawing hard from the ionosphere and the ozone layer. Now, that's if you need electricity. But in this model, like these beings would tell us, why would you do that to yourselves when you can have ionic? It is the utilization of neutrons through the expression of ions. So why would you restrict yourself to what you call electrons when you can have ions and neutrons that are a million times more powerful and more versatile for everything you want to do? And that includes the formulation, reformulation, and deformulation of matter, which is fundamental to this process. So the formulation of matter would be essentially formulating matter out of the etheric so that you end scarcity at a physical level. The deformulation of matter would be taking any type of garbage, any type of pollution, and running it through magnetic pulsing sequences and units that essentially convert it back to neutral energy. The reformulation of matter would just be simply replicating existing matter to what you need to use. So it could be replicating any type of matter with a perfect, all the way down to a quantum level of replication of that matter for practical purposes. So this is the culmination of this technology, is the end of scarcity, not just on the energy level, it's the end of scarcity on a resource level. And so it's the end of raping the earth for resources. It's the end of pollution because you can essentially clean the air, the water, the land, anything. So it's really so fundamental, but you can see as soon as you say this, and government agencies are fully aware of this, and I've communicated with scientists around the world about this, and they have every one of our devices built, ready to go and everything. But the thing about it is, you cannot have our present economic structure with this type of technology, because our whole system is based on the idea of scarcity. And as soon as you remove scarcity, what happens to the price of gold? What happens to the price of diamonds? When I can replicate a bar of gold over and over and over and over and over, and now I have 10,000 tons of gold, it's completely worthless. So it crashes economies. So unless you're ready to move forward and fully commit to providing everyone with the food, water, resources that they need to have a high level standard of living, which in my opinion requires a significant leap in consciousness, a significant ascension. I mean, we'll never probably be fully ascended, but we need enough ascension so that we don't just take this technology and turn it into a weapon, or make the disparity of income so great so that only the super rich have the magnetic technology and all the resources at their disposal, and then the rest of the planet planet is kept in complete poverty, even though it would be free, essentially free, to give them all the same exact resources as the super rich. So, I mean, you've got to think in terms of what encourages ascension, what encourages the expansion of consciousness. And one of the ways that we've discovered works so well is water. And that's why when Matthew contacted me, he said, what do you want to talk about? I said, I think water might be one of the topics because it's so fundamental to life and it's such an easy path to ascension, if you want to say that. Like, it's relatively simple from a technological point of view to raise the resonant frequency and the vibratory rate of all water on the planet, which then impacts all life on the planet. So I can, if you guys want to ask questions, let's do it, or we can move into those slides or whatever you guys want, because I know that this is a very educated group. So
Crystal, if you would bring up the slides that we showed earlier today, and then I'll jump in a little bit later and ask some questions, would please?
Sure, but I would like to say before I do that, I must really say this. Wow, Kevin is so eloquently composed, and he's so eloquently expressed in this most sophisticated terminologies that is so relevant to the work that we do at the free energy community, and that you really kept us enthralled. I can see the faces and the expression. We could listen to you forever, Kevin. Right. It's amazing the things that you're talking about. It's like, wow, so spot on. And we are a spiritual group as well, where science meets spirit, a platform where science meets spirit. Okay, Fras, I'm going to pull up the pictures now. You're talking about the vortex mathematics?
Yes,
sure,
please.
sure. All of those graphics were so fundamental to this model. But what I'll try to do is connect them to the metaphysical or spiritual aspects of the dynamics of the system. So it's okay. So yeah, we can even, that's whatever one you want to start with is fine. Whatever one.
I don't know why. You know, I was clicking on a different picture and this one comes up. This is press. I don't know how to do it. Okay, let me stop sharing again.
Yeah, and close your windows. The ones that have images in them, and then it'll re-click with a new viewer.
I'll give you, and while you're doing that, I'll tell you guys just briefly how we connect some of this to the physiology of the human body, because part of our areas of research has to do directly with medical technology and how the transformation and the evolution of medical technology is going to explode when this technology comes out. So blood, for example, in this model, we consider blood a form of biological magnetic current. So blood has a draw, we would call it a draw factor. It has a connection to the etheric field in it. Now, if you think about how blood moves through the capillaries and through the veins, through the arteries and everything, and you think about the vortex pattern of blood, okay? And then you think about the relationship of platelets and how they have the shape of platelets, and you think about like how the body itself is so full of vortices, of toroidal shapes, all the way down to the subatomic level. That is so critical and fundamental to how you change how medicine relates to the body. So an example of that would be, forget about putting additional chemicals into a body to achieve certain results, okay? There's no need to do that, because if we can put the proper neutral magnetic pulsing in a person, first of all, there's no need to penetrate the epidermis with it. This is all transdermal technology. It goes right through the body. This is at a quantum level, so it passes right through the body. When we change the resonant frequency of the blood, or we change the resonant frequency of the platelets, we stimulate instantaneous healing responses across the board. So this gets kind of weird, and now the stuff I'm sharing with you guys comes from beings that were basically giving us this information and then telling us how to do it. with magnetic healing tremors that will transform people. Every one of us has an energetic template that exists around us that contains our uncorrupted DNA. That is not influenced by epigenetic factors that we have inherited or we've picked up from the environment, such as vaccines, such as contamination through the environment, such as anything that chemicals that are put into food, anything that's non-organic that we eat or drink, any EMFs or RFs that we are exposed to 24/7 that have the ability, especially when you get into 5G and 10G networks, that have the ability to mutate cells. And we know this for a fact because this is something that we work on at work, and you have to be extremely careful. So what the magnetic technology can do is tap your etheric framework and synchronize you to that etheric framework and restore your physiology to your original genetic template. And then actually goes beyond that, because our genes are incredibly dynamic etherically. So there are genes that are turned off. There are genes that are turned on, depending on the resonant frequency and the pulsar that we exist on this planet. The entire genome on this planet, and I'm talking about all life on the planet and all plant life, all animal life, everything, exists at a certain resonant frequency that is intimately connected to the magnetosphere, the ionosphere, and the torus field of our planet. As that field changes, you will see a revolutionary transformation in genetic encoding across the board on this planet. And I am not understating that. This is unlocking genes. This is changing how we express ourselves through nature, our relationship to nature, animals and their relationship to each other, our relationship to plants. Everything will transform when this process undergoes. And it is an absolute revolutionary transformation that starts from the genetic level on up, because our genes are intimately connected to the etheric field, and they bring in that etheric energy, they convert that energy, they put it to use, and then it moves on. As we unlock genes and as we raise the resonant frequency of our genetic encoding, it's, and I don't want to say this because at this level of consciousness, this instigates greed and control, but you are essentially unlocking the fountain of youth, because you will give the person, any individual, the ability to choose their incarnation age and basically stay in that life as long as their universal consciousness and their heart guidance says it's time for you to stay in this life. You need to stay here for this much longer. And it may be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, but at some point you say they understand it's now I need to move on and I'm done with this incarnation. It's time to move on. But we are getting to that level of ascension, and it all starts at the genetic level and the magnetic encoding and the magnetic resonance that happens. If you take any single point in space, because there's no such thing as space, but any single point that you can imagine, and you could say any vector point on the, in the vector potential of the magnetic, electric, or gravitational potential, any single point in space, if you were to analyze that point goes infinitely deep with an encoding that is measurable, with an encoding that is fully guiding that energy and that process across the board. So this, we would call it the neutral magnetic light, comes through to our system at a higher dimension at an extremely high velocity, like a nearly infinite velocity. It's relatively neutral magnetic light. When it hits our system, and that system could be like our solar system, for example, it basically steps down and basically converts into something that's more manageable in the physical world, and then goes through every single system. And what holds everything together? What holds everything together in this model? It's the flow of the etheric energy through the system and counter-rotating vortices that lock onto each other, that create that hold. And then so the energy moves in through a vortex, comes out through a vortex, goes back into the etheric field. Now, why is that important? It's important because on you take the entire element periodic table. And there's a lot more elements that we are currently not tapping on our planet. There's a lot more. But if you hit the magnetic resonant frequency of any one of those elements, you can separate what we would call the molecular structures of that element. It's not a strong force as we have been brainwashed to believe for the last 100 years. It's not a strong force. There's no strong force, there's no weak force. It's a force that can be transformed and changed and modified with magnetic pulsing. Now, this goes straight back to your slides, those slides of the torus and the mathematics. If you think about the ratios that the numbers represent, they represent, in this model, they represent energetic ratios that are very critical to the combining those ratios to tap the etheric field. Okay, so that's really important because we have to have the torus spins at certain frequencies. The torus spins at certain revolutions, and Tesla was really onto this. The only thing that if he had kept his funding going, I guarantee you, he would have developed all of our units, or something very, very similar to them in principle and dynamic. The only thing that they cut his funding short was he was creating an etheric excursion with an extremely high amount of voltage or wattage, or however you want to call it. It was an electrical phenomenon and he was creating that they would call it the barrier or the interdimensional barrier. And it requires like 32,000 volts, and it requires like, something that was so high. And so he had that, and he figured that out very quickly, that if he created that break in the barrier, he could get this additional energy coming into his environment and into his lab. The difference between what he was doing and what we are doing is we don't use voltage and electricity to break the barrier, because anytime you incur an electrical field, you automatically stifle the etheric flow. You are blocking the etheric flow. So it's always like one step forward, one step back, one step forward, one step back. And that's why getting like a COP of like 3 or 4 or 1.8 or whatever it is, I firmly think that those devices are possible. And we've had those devices and utilized those devices, and they're fine. And over unity is very real. There's no question about it. Yeah. The problem with it, though, is if you're using an electrical circuit to tap the etheric, because in every over unity device that we analyze, there's always some component into it. It could be scalar technology, it could be counter-rotating vortices, it could be some sort of torus that they're creating with their coils. And we know at that point, that's where the etheric energy is coming into the unit, is coming into the device, is coming into the circuit board. And that's how they're getting that achievement of over unity. The problem, though, is as long as you're relying on an electrical expression to tap the etheric, you're blocking it at the same time. And this is why the beings said, if you want to do it freely, you have to create a neutral field. You have to combine north and south, combine the polarities, combine them at a high rate, combine them and get the combination of those through the coils and through, so that your whole torus that surrounds your unit is pulsing with a relatively neutral expression. So when you go to measure it, you're not detecting high polarities. You're detecting something that's relatively neutral. Then the incursion from the etheric is free to move. Now, the problem with that, though, is then you say, well, now what the hell do? We have all this neutral energy. You're like scientists that analyze the devices will say, well, shit, you've got a lot of extra neutrons. You've got a lot of extra neutrinos. So the problem is, what the hell do you do with all this neutral energy? Well, that's part of the circuitry that we convert the neutral energy. And guess how we do that? Through the gap jumping. It's just like the synapses in the brain. You convert it through a gap jump. It takes on a polarity. That polarity then now has the power to do work. It has the power to transform matter. It has the power to produce anti-gravitic fields. It has all those things that are powerful. And then we take that polarized energy, turn it back into neutral, and put it back, recycle into the system. So that's exactly the process. You go from neutral to polarity to neutral. And then you are connecting to the wheelwork of nature, as Faraday used to talk about. You cannot connect to the wheelwork of nature with a purely electrical device. Now, electric and magnetic go hand in hand, but the more neutral you get, the less electrical response you get. So like we could have a unit, for example, that could have 480 horsepower and tremendous magnetic fields that are pulsing and rotating and counter-rotating around that have a relatively neutral expression with an extremely small amount of voltage, because we are so enveloped in a neutral field that we are pulling etheric, pulling etheric, pulling etheric. Anytime they're in this model, anytime you tap what you would say is the electric scalar potential, like in conventional physics, anytime you're tapping the electric scalar potential in this model, the reason you're doing it is because it's a byproduct of the magnetic phenomenon that is taking place. It's a byproduct of a magnetic reaction that's taking place. So even lightning, for example, we would say lightning, and this has been well documented, that there's a stream, a magnetic stream that connects into the ionosphere, that connects into the earth before a lightning bolt happens, and a lightning bolt takes place in that. So relative to the elements that are in the atmosphere, so it could be any elements that are in the air, relative to the moisture, relative to the air pressure. Now, air pressure, we would say, is a function of a magnetic circuit that creates that pressure. Relative to all of that, you will have the expression, what we would call in conventional terms, the electrical expression of that magnetic phenomenon, right? So there's a highly polarized event happening between the ionosphere and the ground, or between the atmosphere and the ground. And Tesla was very, very aware of this. So to the degree that you have all these other factors, you have additional, so like, let's say you bring in electricity, you are capturing resonance signatures from elements, and those resonance signatures have additional electrons, as we would call it. What they really are in this model are they are unattached vortices. It's like a single vortice that doesn't have its pair. It's like half of a torus. They are looking for an expulsion or a way out. They're looking for the easiest path of redistribution, we would call it. So that lightning bolt is searching for the easiest path of redistribution, the easiest way to ground. When you create a neutral draw to the ionosphere, you can have a tremendous amount of power with an extremely small amount of electrical byproduct. And that's really important, because we don't, in this technology, we want to keep the electric scalar potential at a minimum, because all it does is interfere with the process of the units. It creates problems because it tends to short circuit. It tends to jump gaps where it's not supposed to jump. If the whole thing were lighting up with electrical fields, it wouldn't even run. It would be impossible. And so we've got to keep the electric scalar potential to a bare minimum, because we want the neutral magnetic potential at a maximum. That way we have an unlimited amount of power that's uninterrupted. And I know for all of you physics geeks that will listen to this, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying, that we want to tap the magnetic vector potential as much as possible. And keep in mind, we are also tapping the gravitational scalar field. So we like the magnetic stuff, and we like the gravity stuff, because you can't get away from the gravity stuff unless you create a magnetic circuit. Now, here's the other thing. You can create, and this is a device that will be used in industry. You can create a gravitational circuit that is based on neutral magnetic technology that has no mass needed for the gravity and has no rotation needed for the gravity. Now, that's really important, because when you're talking about like flying in space, you need an inertia dampeners, you need artificial gravity, or when you're talking about industry where we want to be able to manufacture crystals and geometric structures and crystalline metallic structures, we need to do that in a gravity-free environment, because we have to get three-dimensional, perfectly shaped three-dimensional quasi-crystal molecular structures, because that type of material has a draw to the etheric 100% of the time. So you want to make those need to be manufactured in a magnetic field and in a zero gravity field. So how do you have a zero gravity field while you're on Earth? You create a magnetic circuit that mimics the Earth's gravity circuit, and it sends energy from the top to the bottom. It has a push-pull phenomenon. There's no mass involved and there's no rotation needed, but it is absolutely, you can create zero gravity in there, or you can create higher gravity or less gravity, any degree of it. And that's really an important fundamental concept to understand, that gravity is not a function of mass. So it's something that we can work with from a manufacturing point of view, and it's something that we can work with from a medical point of view, and then of course ultimately for space travel and things like that. But so yeah, all of these torus fields that you're showing, and the one around the body is so critical. So maybe at the end of this talk, I'll play this quick little water meditation I did, so people can start to engage a little bit of their consciousness and their mind in this. Because as we move into this ascension, or we even start to even raise our consciousness even the slightest bit, and it could be micro expressions of it, the torus field around the body begins to pulsate and become more and more enhanced. As the rotation strengthens, as the counter rotation strengthens, the etheric draw strengthens. Now, part of the reason why why these aliens or these higher beings won't just open the floodgates on our planet all at once, is because if you did that to our system, you would create so much pressure in the system that it would be cataclysmic. It would create earthquakes, it would create volcanoes, it would create all these things, because it's all interconnected in the system. So the gradual influx of the energy goes higher, higher, higher. When we get through certain stages of this ascension that we're moving into, we will have significantly more energy around us. Our toroidal field will look exactly like what's on the screen right now, where it's incredibly enhanced, and it becomes a vehicle for the abilities that we are basically created to express. So that right there, when you think about that and the connection to consciousness that torus has on the screen right now, think about your ability. You are so connected with the etheric right now. You have the ability to teleport with that. You can use that as a vehicle, a natural vehicle. You have the ability to bilocate. You have the ability to manifest from the etheric, because now you have pulsing counter-rotating fields that you can consciously control the pulse rates on. And so that gives you all of these different abilities. It gives you the ability of transportation. It gives you the ability to communicate telepathically, not with just beings on our planet, but with beings on other worlds. So this is a very powerful move that we're making into an ascension reality, that all of this technology that we have talked about and worked on for years, we are essentially training the human being to do all of this work. All of this technology becomes completely unnecessary as the human being moves into that level of consciousness, if that makes sense. You can use it as a tool for certain things, and we will, and society will use it, because there's a training, there's degrees of learning, there's degrees of training, there's certain parts of it that you may say, oh no, we absolutely want the tech for that, or we absolutely want it for that. But more and more people will feel the technology and feel the pulse rates of the fields around the units, and they will be able to duplicate those with their consciousness. So how does that look for water? People will naturally have the ability to entrain water, to work with water, to make water anti-gravitic. You will have groups of people that will sing and tone, and they will instruments around water. They will raise water in columns of vortices. And they will do that not just for entertainment and for spiritual and ceremonial purposes. They'll do it because that taps energy. Water taps an etheric flow that is very, very difficult to contain when it fully is in our presence, and it will bring energy out to the environment. It will bring transformative energy to the environment. So you gotta think in terms of the human ability. We're fully designed to mimic magnetic pulse rates with our consciousness and with our body. We're fully designed to communicate interdimensionally. We're fully designed to travel astrally, and then even transforming and bringing our physical up to the astral and then back to the physical. All of those abilities are something that we are absolutely 100% capable of doing. And this type of technology can assist in the schooling of that process. So that's kind of how it starts connecting to spirituality.
All right.
Any questions or anything?
Yeah.
Press, you want
Are
me
you
to pull
ready?
out the picture?
Alrighty.
Press.
All right. Well, basically getting started on this one, we start with the basics. And we have two forces that we look at. One is the electrical and the other is the magnetic. And we see that the electrical is expansion. It expands and creates a magnetic field. But the magnetic field is also implosive. And where on the electrical side, you start with voltage and you get magnetism in the electrical circuitry. It is produced. In many ways, the voltage is shoving that magnetic field forward. And we see this when we talk about long communication lines where we're getting ready to get between point A and point B, and there's like 20 miles of wire, but it's almost instantaneous when we make the connection with the two ends. So the implosive side in electronics, you'll have on the secondary, the magnetic field appears first. And when it collapses, it gives you the voltage in the secondary. So this is your fundamental on the physics of these two systems, but they work almost in opposition to each other, or in the 369 infinity loop of Tesla, you have an expansion side and then a contraction side, and you're circulating these fields into it. We talk about frequency, and you brought up the point of we're getting new signals inside the solar system at this time. Our sun is acting differently because it's in a galaxy that is dynamic. It's where you are in the galaxy at that moment in time is what you're going to pick up from the galactic center, which is another emitter of a larger toroidal system. So we're now inside a bigger loop, and as humans traveling through it in our solar system, we're following our sun on planet Earth, which is following the galactic center, but our little view of that galactic center is changing. So we're bringing into our part of that matrix different frequencies. Well, how does that happen? We have to go back to the basic toroidal shape, which was we saw in the picture with the inside our personal space, and it's expansion, like maybe out of the top of your head. We're going to start simple. Goes out and around and comes in through the bottom, up to the bottom. But as it comes in, it brings in the frequencies into that center of your being, of that toroidal field. Well, it doesn't stay there. It expands out the top again. So it recycles it back out with acceleration. When you talk about the nuclear blasts, you're setting up a odd harmonic, an odd frequency, no different than you're sitting inside a box with a firecracker inside a metal building, and you throw the firecracker out and the whole building on the inside rattles. But it's besides that, it rattles the building next to you if it's a big enough firecracker. So it's these odd harmonics that are causing this dis-ease in our system and maybe perpetuated, as you mentioned earlier, further out. How am I doing?
Great. I mean, yeah, I mean, all that makes perfect sense. If you have the ability to, in the devices that you're using, if you can avoid electromagnets and try to go to regular magnets for your magnetic fields, and then avoid AC and use DC, just use straight up DC that you can control the pulse rate and the resonant frequency on, then you can establish, you're getting a little closer to the neutral magnetic model to where you can have more stable toruses and more stable fields that will begin to resonate and pulse and start to tap the etheric a little more clearly. Ideally, if you have alternating magnetic fields in rotation around your coils or in the midst of your coils, then you can combine, basically what you're doing is you're finding the sweet spot, and you can, between the rotational speed and then the coil, basically the coil capacity. And so, but yeah, I agree with you that it's, I don't know what's the simplest way to say it. The nuclear blasts really pissed off a lot of higher beings around the world. I mean, it really pissed off a lot of beings, and it really, what did they say? What would the terminology they used? As soon as that first atomic blast went off and it put us under the microscope, it immediately called for the convening of a lot of different planetary governing bodies, if you want to call it that. Some people will call it the Galactic Council and all that, where they put us on an accelerated path for ascension. That what it was already like, okay, we can only allow this to happen for so long. They immediately put shielding up, they immediately put filtering up, they immediately did all kinds of stuff to try to basically accommodate the contamination that was being released through the energy streams that came from this planet. And I mean, there's been hundreds of nuclear tests. And so this is partly why, like, if they're like in Fukushima and all the UFOs that are reported, like over Fukushima and then over Chernobyl, it is very critical to them to keep that contamination to a minimum. And so there's a couple of things they've said, like the same type of technology on how to render the nuclear waste in a nuclear power plant inert in a matter of seconds, in a matter of minutes. And so that technology is fully out there. Governments have this technology and everything. So I mean, it's the ability to essentially turn that dangerous waste into something very inert or neutral. And I don't like to say neutral because they're going, oh my God, not more neutrons, but I mean like neutral, etherically neutral. So it's a pretty big deal, like what's happened on this planet. And it basically gives them the right to accelerate our ascension and to be involved in the coming pole shift and be involved in the earth changes and be involved in what happens on this planet, because we are impacting their worlds as well. So they have the full right to do everything they're doing. And it's the planet's on, we're under a microscope right now. So
we take a look at things like the Hutchinson effect, and basically you're dealing with frequency and magnetic fields. And in some of his experiments, you started to see levitation of bowling balls and things like that, but also 100%. The disassociation of the iron. It pulled apart just like taffy.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's the same type of thing where he had that rotating disc. He had that with the pulsing field on it. He was creating, a torus was naturally forming around it. He started to tap the etheric on it. And as soon as it hit certain pulse rates, all of a sudden gravity changes. Mm-hmm. And it's not because he did some magical thing to cancel out the mass of the earth. It's because he changed the gravity circuit. He hit pulse rates that once you cancel either the push or the pull phenomenon, like we were told, the gravity will know that circuit is incomplete around that torus. You have freed yourself of gravity, and that's for travel, that's for, like I said, manufacturing, but like he experienced the same thing. And when you hit other certain pulse rates, you basically take apart what we would call matter. You're disassembling matter, or as we would call it, you're deformulating the matter, because you're hitting certain magnetic pulse resonant frequencies that are the same exact vortices that are going through that iron, and they make it just come right apart and fall right apart. It's exactly the way that you break down garbage. You can put these devices around a landfill and turn an entire landfill into essentially nothing. 99.99999% of the garbage in that landfill is completely gone. And the stuff that remains is actually a relatively neutral residue that you can actually use for whatever you want, for agriculture. You can do the same thing with all plastics, with all types of contamination. So this is very fundamental to cleaning up this world, which is why the words we were given, magnetic energy to heal the planet, that's the title on like one of my sites or whatever. It's magnetic energy to heal the planet, because that's exactly what it's for, is taking away the pollution.
Okay, I've got one more, and then I'm going to turn this over to Crystal. Resonant frequency, in the line that when we have a toroidal field, it has a resonant frequency. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a planet, a solar system, a galaxy, or an individual, it's an address. It has a specific frequency to that.
Yes.
When we get into electrical contamination of electrical systems like factories and things like that, we have odd harmonics, which is a frequency, which will destroy motors. It will actually destroy concrete in the area where that odd harmonic is in. So we get into the anti-gravitics. So you've neutralized your attachment, your frequency attachment to your planet. Then to travel in space, all you have to do is become resident with the destination that you want to go to, and you get sucked to it.
Well,
so I understand it, Chrissy.
Yeah, so here's the basic synopsis of how we were told space travel works with these types of beings and how we will do it as humans. And I'm not saying anything that governments don't already know about. They're fully aware of everything I'm about to say. So there's certain alloys that receive etheric energy quite effectively, and they receive it without taking on polarization, without taking on a charge, for example, like a north or south charge. Every solar system, like the torus around every star, produces very identifiable magnetic pulse rates, or if you want to call magnetic resonant frequencies. The ship, the very skin of the ship and the field around that ship connects with that heliosphere, that heliosheet, or however you want to identify it, but it's essentially that field around that star, and it attracts to that beyond space and time. So it attracts to it at a nearly infinite velocity. It goes way beyond the speed of light. This is a ship that would be completely encased like in a torus field and a fully shielded force field. And the entire resonance, exactly how you just described it, is perfectly in tune with the resonant frequency of that other solar system or whatever your destination is. And it attracts, the universal law of attract is employed. And so there, like we were told, there are neutral magnetic streams throughout the universe, throughout all solar systems, they're all over the place. As soon as you attract to a distant system, your ship enters into a neutral stream, and the whole polarity of it is going straight toward that other system, and it pulls it essentially outside of space and time. You can see it's kind of like a wormhole, but it's more based on attract. So you're attracted to your destination extremely fast and extremely safely. And then once you get there, then you can have whatever magnetic devices or whatever that will get you all around the solar system or visiting other planets and all that. Electrical devices will not function in that environment. And that's so, like, like fully aware, like when you are encased in a pulsing magnetic field around your vehicle, you can't use, like, for example, an electrical cell phone or an electrical blender or an electrical heater. Like none of those devices work in that environment because they do not. Okay, here's the simple way of saying it. There are no free electrons in the ether. So when we're moving through an etheric system, we can't count on electricity to run everything because there's no way to pull it and there's no way to contain it through a neutral magnetic field because you can't get free electrons from the ether. You can only get neutral energy from the ether, and then you can convert it to like electrons when you need, but even that, it can't be a hot electron. It can't be a hot wire or hot conductor because that automatically has a magnetic field associated with it. And as soon as you do that, you're trying to pull ether in, and the ether, you're going to create an expression of the electrical field that's going to short, it's not going to work in that environment. So the closest thing you could get to what we generally think of as electricity would be like a cold pulsing electricity that doesn't have a hot expression and create a hot conductor. And so it can be, now the cold pulsing electricity is white, it can be wireless. So like you can have it just hit you white, so you attract it to your device if you want to, or you can just use, because it's closer to like what we would call neutral magnetic current. And you can have neutral magnetic current running the whole vehicle. It can be your engines, it can be everything. That's fine because all of that doesn't interfere with the etheric draw. But the electrical devices totally interfere with the etheric draw. And so that creates ripples and all kinds of problems. So
Right.
Super. Thank you much. Your floor. To you, Crystal.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It was so eloquent, as I said earlier. I was really amazed with the spot on terminologies that you're using, Kevin. Kevin, okay, the human body, if I may share screen here, I just wanted to have a better understanding of the vibrational frequency that you were talking about. So each and every one of us in our auric fields, because we are biochemical, electrical, magnetic beings, right? So therefore we have a toroidal field in our human body system. And so, I mean, okay, hang on a minute. Let me just show in sequence that what I mean. That
the
I
one you were
wanted
just showing
to explain.
is really good with the heart center because that's so pertinent to everything that we're working on.
Yes, it is. So being this toroidal machine that we are emanating our energy fields, which you are talking about the energy signature, the vibrational frequency. Do I take it that, hang on a minute, let me just make a point here. Okay, so everything has a toroidal field around it, okay, in the universe. I mean, the infinitesimal particle of creation is a toroid in itself, right? So everything has a toroidal field to have that vibrational frequency of a signature that is a destination for time travel, perhaps, you know? So if you look at this, right, everything, every atom, every matter has a toroidal field.
All right, so I'll tell you guys, this is something I don't normally talk about, but I'll tell you the information we were given about time.
Yeah.
So, well, first of all, the heart. So having the heart be the center of that graphic is so pertinent. So like, as you all know, this heart, the vibration coming through the heart taps a universal consciousness. It goes like, that's where we do it. And like we were told, as you ascend and as you get into your future societies, your societies will become heart driven. Heart, not in the biological sense, but in the heart center energetic sense. They will become heart driven. So essentially you're becoming a universally consciousness driven society. So not only through the interconnectivity of people to each other, but to all of life. And so everything from economics to politics, the decision-making, group decision-making is all coming through heart-centered consciousness, basically, through that heart, and that's tapping a universal consciousness. So part of our goal and the goal of others as well, when it comes to ascension enhancing technology, is to do everything we can to magnify that resonant frequency in the heart center, to help people tune into that better, to help. And I mean, there's so much stuff out there that already does it. There's so many people that already do it. They know how to do it. And I think that's really, really important to ascension, that the more people that do that, the more it starts to get into collective consciousness. But so I think that graphic is pertinent, because that's really going to be kind of our future, and what drives our societies and what drives our technology, our spirituality, our religion, is based on that heart-centered consciousness, which then interconnects everyone. For time, the information we were given about time is interesting. So when you get like in a higher realm, there's no time. So you can look at events all at the same time within a given cycle. So a given universal cycle will contain all events simultaneously. But when you get into the physical reality, there's an underlying, if you want to say, or an overarching pulse rate, like a magnetic pulse rate to our existence that is extremely high, that gives linear, sequential, like events. It makes events linear. So here's like one way of saying it. Let's say you're standing here and you move to your left or something, you move to your right, or you move your hand or something. Outside of space and time, like if you're in a magnetic device and you look at someone from a higher pulse rate, you just see it all happening at once. But if you allow like the overarching pulse rate to do its thing, it's not that time has changed from one event to another. It's that a different pulse field has changed, and now it appears as if there's linear movement in linear time, when in fact it's the change in an overarching pulse rate to the existence. And that allows you to have what we would say, like, normal, stable life in a physical reality that appears as if there's time, and it appears as if there's different events that take place sequentially, when in fact there really isn't. So why that's important is because each event packet is separate to some degree. And the pulse rate, the overarching pulse rate, is so extremely high that until you get, from a conventional physics point of view, until you get into an extremely high speed particle event, it still looks as if the particles are taking place over time and over space. But when you hit the magnetic pulse rate of that overarching thing, you can essentially travel to any pulse sequence in the whole event line. So like they called it, you don't time travel, you event travel. And you can event travel to any sequence of events at any point in what you call time. There's no real time, you're just event traveling. Now, the reason why you can't, if you change something in the past, it doesn't ripple to the future, is because in reality, at the higher dimensional, the interdimensional etheric realm, all those events took place at once. So if you try to change the past, you don't really ripple it to the future. You only change what you changed right then. Because there's a different pulse rate or sequence or resonant, like the resonant signatures are different. So you can't just go back and like stop an assassination or something. All you've done is stop the assassination right there, but all the other events are still the same. And that's why event travel is usually is used to try to manipulate the future or the past, because it's very, very difficult to do that. Now, you can put something on a different event line, if that makes sense. So like if you think about like in terms of the Mandela effect, that can actually take place. And that can take place because you take certain events and you change them to a degree. So like you may have a million little changes on this new event line, and that could be biblical scripture changes, it could be changes in the environment, it could be all these changes, but they're still locked in events that will not be altered, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it is possible to change event lines to some degree, but once you have chosen certain incarnation things and society, there are certain locked in events that are going to take place. And so, and that's just like the new, and that's partly because the energy coming in through the etheric realm into us and into everything around us is fully 100% encoded. And you want to talk about like a simulation, or people think reality is a simulation. In some sense, like in a very natural sense, I wouldn't say there's something artificial or nefarious like the Matrix happening, but the energy coming in is fully encoded in the system, and it's fully encoded to go to destination, and it could go on for billions of destinations before it goes back to source. That is dynamic. That process is dynamic. That process is changing all the time. That process is always updating. That process is always, but it's fully encoded energy. And that's partly why when things resist that encoding, immediate action occurs in nature and in hyperdimensional ways to rectify that, to get back to the encoded process, if that makes sense, to get back to the encoding that's coming in through the system. And that's partly why certain changes are taking place on our planet right now, geophysically and everything, because there's a level of encoding that's coming that's pushing us essentially into a type of reality of ascension that we've all agreed upon coming into this ride, essentially, if you want to say that we're all, we're all here on an incredible journey, incredible ride. And anything that interrupts that immediately starts getting corrective action automatically in the system to make sure that our ride stays on the right tracks, if you will.
Yeah, I just want to understand the basis of the production of the energy fields around us, right? The toroidal flow that gives us the vibrational frequency. Correct me if I'm wrong. Here we have a gathering of spiritual technologies together. Perhaps we may be able to explore this phenomenon together. So we see here the toroidal flow of energy on a human body, which, as I said before, chemical, biological, magnetic, electrical being that we are like a device ourselves, a machine. So if you look at this flow, I mean, we are inside here in the middle. And then if you look at the flow, the toroidal structure energy field, I mean, that somebody has drawn a diagram on clockwise motion, wherever, one interval distance between one vibration and one frequency. So does it mean that Kevin and all of us here, that the vibrational frequency that we are emanating from our bodies in the toroidal auric field, does it mean that when we are connecting our heart, like the capacitor, which is connecting to the soul, that is connecting to source, Father, Mother, God, Supreme Creator, whatever, that gives the raising of the vibrational frequency, the how shall we, raising vibration, does it come into play in this way that the rate would be defined as the frequency vibration? Slow 100%. Rate, fast rate, is that how is determined the frequency?
So like imagine that, imagine that graphic that's showing right now, and imagine a counter-rotating toroidal field at the same time. Okay, so there's almost always rotation and counter rotation. So as soon as you initiate rotation, the universe automatically initiates counter rotation. So there's a counter rotating field at the same time. So if you imagine like our heart centers at the center of that, that neutral point
in the middle here.
In the middle there. So we would say that neutral point, and people that are adept at meditating and everything, they know when you go into your heart space, you feel that incredible neutral sense of, holy cow, like everything's going to be okay. I'm okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm connected to all the universe. I'm connected to all reality. I'm connected to source.
And that's the
So
samadhi point, isn't it? The 0 point of samadhi.
yes, yeah, sure. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And you could say it's the 0 point. You could say it's the interdimensional membrane opening, if you want to say it that way. But the pressure and the neutral form of energy at the center of that draws the source energy. Now, here's the problem, and this is the problem that we're experiencing across the globe right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome that we get the neutral energy coming into our heart center, and it keeps us all alive, right? I mean, we are connected to source, whether we like it or not. Nothing is going to break that connection. Okay, so even when we leave our physical bodies, we're still connected. We will still have those torus fields around us at all times. There's nothing's going to change that. But as soon as the energy starts to excurge, or as it starts to move down the torus and starts to get into those other areas where, and the math all shows this, it's at that point when a huge variety of resonant frequencies, or what we would call polarities, 1,000,000 different polarities, begin to form that connect to what we are currently thinking, feeling, experiencing physically. If we're angry, if we're hurt, if we're jealous, whatever it is, we will change the resonant frequencies of the field and the field coming all around us. We will change it. Now, as it comes back in, of course, what does source do? Source is the great transmuter. And that pressure and those counter-rotating vortices compress that energy and neutralize it back to source. So part of the transformation of ascension is not only the speed of the pulse rate changing on our counter-rotating toroidal fields, the speed will enhance, the intensity will be much higher, but the resonant frequencies, or if you want to say the consciousness contribution to our toroidal fields, will change dramatically. So it will be and one way of saying that is, as that heart expression, torus, envelops people, it will be extremely difficult for them to hold on to old mental constructs that have a contrary vibration or contrary resonant frequency. It'll be very difficult, for example, to hold on to anger, or to hold on to hate, or to hold on to separateness. The idea that you're alone. It will be very difficult for someone to go, oh my God, I'm so lonely. I'm the only one here and I'm all alone in this life. And no, the heart says, good God, you've never been alone. You never will be alone. You can't be alone even if you tried. Even when you leave your body, you're going to have so much around you and so many beings around you. You're going to be like, Jesus Christ, I need some alone time.
Absolutely well said, Kevin.
But seriously though, it's when that torus becomes that much more enhanced and that's much stronger, and people can experience this, and people have experienced it even with technology that enhances the heart energy center very strong. They cannot hold on to pain from the past, hate from the past, unforgiveness, all these other things, fear of the future. All of those low vibration energies, what they are is they're dissonant energies from what the heart is producing. They're dissonant from what the heart is generating. And so it will flood, the torus fields around us will be completely flooded with that neutral energy. And of course, that looks like some form of love, some form of unconditional love. It looks like some form of universal consciousness. And it's probably slightly different for everyone, but it's all in that realm of something that's very interconnected, where everyone senses the presence of others. They sense the presence of all life. They sense the presence of the cosmos, of other beings, of other dimensions, and all that. And it'll be undeniable and very difficult to get out of that energy, because the hate or the anger will dissipate so fast. It will be transmuted down those spirals back into neutral energy, and then the radiation of the torus and the love frequency will overwhelm everything else. So that's kind of the level I think that we're moving into, but that graphic is perfect for showing.
Absolutely. I just want to put this naive question forth. I mean, it sounds too simplistic, but I just thought that, okay, would low frequency equate to slow vibration in the toroidal field that's going around? Would high frequency equate to a faster spin? Would
Yes.
anybody be able to add to that?
Generally speaking, like in the magnetic units, generally speaking, that is true. Like, and a perfect example of that is if you have a unit that is like, say, 910 pulses for every 4.8 or 5 seconds or whatever, it taps the ionosphere. But if you have it, and that can be so that's a slow armature, that's a slow rotating unit. When you move up into like 5,000 RPMs and you combine it with crystallized structure, you create magnetic light. You create like neutral magnetic light. So I mean, like you think in terms of like speed is definitely important. Now, the only caveat to that is if you know the harmonics of those high frequencies, you can still hit those harmonics and achieve very similar results. And that's why you don't always have to have 21,000 pulses per second to counteract gravity. You can have harmonics of that achieve very similar effects, if you will. So
Wow.
yeah, but I say as a general rule, yes, the pulse rates will increase. They will be faster. The energy fields around us will have higher resonant frequencies, higher pulse rates, and more energy through them for sure.
The faster the spin, the
faster
better the pulse rates and the more productive of energy.
For sure.
Ooh, cool. So that means there's a higher vibrational frequency flow for all of us in the human embodiment as well.
And not just for us, for everything on the planet, including the planet itself. And the entire solar system as well. So, I mean, we're talking about a solar system-wide change in a higher, faster vibration resonant frequency for the cycle that we're moving into. And then we'll go back to the fun ride, the haunted house part of the ride where we all, get to kill each other and feel pain for a few thousand, and then we'll go back to the high side again. So, I mean, because we're at a position where there's always going to be a balance and a return to source that is ultimately neutral, but the polarizations are extreme. So you have these high sides and these low sides. At the end of the high side, most people will either transcend or move on or leave the planet or do whatever they're going to do. But so we're in a system like that right now. We're not, other systems, according to what we were told, don't have the extreme level of polarization that we do. But our system is very, very popular. I mean, the waiting list to get into our system is thousands of years. I mean, it's a very popular ride and people want to get on this ride for lots of reasons.
Oh, wow, Kevin, thank you so much for clarifying a lot of things here. Press, back to you. Is there anything else that you want Kevin to clarify before we close?
Well, we get into some very interesting discussions in the R&D group, and it has to do with what frequency are we going to be operating in? Is it going to be in 50 cycle or 60 cycle, which is very low frequencies, or are we going into the kilohertz and into that one? And it's that balancing act. And we also have other members in the research group that talk about getting away from the electrical and the frequency altogether in that sign of it and move to a toroidal DC pulse.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pulse DC, and you definitely, in my opinion, based on different over Unity devices and everything, you definitely want to be in the kilohertz range. So, I mean, you want to be at least like 32 kilohertz, and then like you can go up to like 50 or 80. I mean, there's all kinds of things. But you got to keep in mind, it's not just as simple as throw in pulse DC at 32 kilohertz, and all of a sudden you're going to tap the etheric field. Okay, you've got to have rotation of some sort. So you need rotation and counter rotation. So if you're going to use just strictly coils and you're going to do like a solid state system, those coils need to be pulsed in sequence. You want to produce rotation through your coils. If you're going to go physical, like actual rotating armatures and magnets, then you'll have, your stator and your arm and all that. And then you're going to rotate those magnets, and you're going to count the number of magnets and the number of coils and calculate what change, you're creating and alternating polarities, because you're going to go north, south, north, south, north, south, north, south. And how often those changes in polarities hit that coil, and then put your meter on that coil and see what the resonant frequency is coming out of that coil and how you're changing it with your rotational speed. Then you will start to unlock the etheric. Okay. So that's the easier way to do it. Because if you're going to go straight electrical, I'm just telling you, you better think Tesla, because you're going to have to create a breach, and that requires tremendous voltage, tremendous equipment, and it's dangerous. I mean, we've done it. It's very dangerous. It's very high maintenance. Whereas if you go pulse DC and you have rotating magnets and you have coils, and you're looking into that like kilohertz range, you don't need to go up into gigahertz or anything, because you can hit harmonics of it through the kilohertz range.
That's correct.
And that's it.
Absolutely.
And I would say that is definitely a way to go. Your wire is important. The gauge wire that you use is important. The core is important. We have all those specs on my site. So like the type of wire you use, what's in that core, the gaps that you create, all of that is critical, because you want to harness a clean etheric draw. Then you will feel it with your body. It will interact with your environment, and it will interact with you, and you'll say, whoa, we're onto something. I can feel this emanating from this. We are hitting an etheric, we are creating an etheric bubble, a torus that is counter-rotating, and you will feel the presence of it. And that's kind of, then at that point, then you could just decide, well, we just leave it. That's good enough just for that. But then if you want to get into how are we going to harness this into a moving parts, then you can get into the whole idea of using, like, there's a whole variety of ways to harness that energy.
Awesome. You did say the etheric magnetic draw in the outer toroidal fields. Yeah, you
Yes.
just
Yes.
gave us some ideas. Thank you so much.
Anytime you're at the edge of the field, so like if you're at the edge of the magnetic field, if you're at the edge of, well, some people say the electromagnetic field, but there's a little bit of argument in there. But let's just say you're at the edge of the magnetic field. At that point, there is the potential for etheric excursion. If that torus is being pulsed at the right resonant frequency or the correct pulse rate, you will have etheric excursion and incursion at that field edge. The center of it will still needs to stay neutral. And the key to making that neutral is to keep as much polarizing energy or fighting energy out of the torus. And that would be like AC, like straight electrical fields. You want to go as high magnetic as you can, because the magnets are already connected. So as soon as that torus hits a certain pulse rate, you will automatically have this effect, like it's almost like magnetic rain through the torus that will be seeking the center of the torus, as well as going around the outer edge. It'll be raining through, and then it will be expressing out as well. And you can see the expansion of the magnetic field, because as soon as you hit it, you'll go from like here to whoo, all of a sudden it's like massive. And so you know there's an additional source of energy coming in that's like interacting with your equipment. So, and this is important. There's a lot of factors here. So you got to like consider the lighting above you, consider the electrical circuits above you. You don't want to be surrounded by electricity, because all of that impedes the etheric draw. You want a hard ground. So you want like a true copper grounding rod with like a ground from your circuit, either like coaxial cable or something like hard, like something that is like a real ground, not just a wimpy little ground, but a serious ground. And then if you can have no electrical fields above you, if you can have any type of geometry above you that enhances the process. So like if you're in a dome, or if you're in a pyramidal shape, or if you're just simply outside, but all those shapes will help enhance the stability of the torus that you form from your equipment, if that makes sense. So you got to think in terms of your environment, and think in terms of like what you're doing, because electricity has a real hard, it hits the torus won't be stable. And if it's not stable, then it can't get a full pulse rate and a full beautiful circular motion that allows it to then expand and really start pulling in etheric magnetic energy to
Perhaps
boost
maybe
your
we should
COP.
we should build our devices in a pyramid, under a pyramid, like
100%.
in a pyramid
100%.
structure.
For sure. And you can even pulse, you can wire the frame of the pyramid, which we've done, of course, with high frequency pulse DC to enhance the etheric like focus down to your unit. So that, and that's really easy, simple thing to do. It's super easy. I mean, you can just build it right in your lab. You just build a quick, simple wire pyramid that pulses DC, and that will concentrate that energy as
even
you
like
the
the copper pyramid behind you would do fine, right? Just
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Structure.
Except ours would have been like big enough to stand under. It was big enough to stand under for several people to stand under, but same exact type of thing. Yep.
Fantastic ideas. You've actually defined a phantom energy field that is on the edge of the outer toroidal field for us. Thank you so much. So that solves a few of the big question marks, isn't it? Pontus, what do you think?
Yes, I agree so much with you, Kevin. Both the water part and the toric field. All.
We so resonate with all those that you were talking about. It's so spot on, Kevin. Thank you.
I could tell all of you are very knowledgeable about this stuff and know like what you're like. Yeah. So I'm so happy.
Well, thanks to all our speakers, really. I mean, we had Dr. Gerard Pollock talking about the fourth phase of water and water intelligence speakers around, in FESIG. We are so fortunate and we're so lucky to be learning from all of you brilliant speakers that you are. Thank you.
I really think water is a very key aspect to what's going to happen on our planet and the changes we're going through. It's going to play a very significant role. And if we have anything to say about it, we're going to have devices all over the place that constantly just entrain water and raise the vibration.
I have also
collaboration is key.
In that.
Collaboration is key. Here we have a pool of resources of speakers, and if you need to tap on any one of them, I'll be very happy to introduce to you, Kevin. And likewise, if you would be able to help us as well at certain points of our development of our devices, is it okay if we call upon you? To answer some questions that our R&D teams, that would be great.
I mean, the weird thing is all I've learned is how much I don't know. The more we learn, the more we realize we don't know. There's so much, we're just barely scratching the surface of everything. It's like, holy crap.
Exactly.
Holy crap.
So this is one can, a vortex can that I developing together with friends.
I love it.
And
water is such a magnetic thing, and the vortex of it is automatically getting that etheric draw.
And not only that, you can enhance the frequency of the water with water outside the container.
Well, and the interesting thing too is water entrains other water. So like if you put a device in a lake, and you run that high vibration, it starts to entrain all of the water in the whole area. Like it tells all of it more oxygen, more nutrients, more life.
Higher frequency.
It's incredible. I know that water is an important aspect to what we're going to be.
Our bodies are 98.5% of weight.
Water content.
So it's very, it's huge. It's huge.
So that being the case, what about the devices we are developing? Where is the water element coming in?
We will come to that, I guess. Start with something.
Always incorporate water if you can.
Oh, yes.
If it's possible. Always incorporate water if it's possible.
The geometry of it.
Graham, you have anything to ask? Graham is really very knowledgeable.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Really good. You mentioned try not to go for electromagnetic coils and things, maybe? Is that what I heard you say? What do you know about the Adams motor, where you have a pulse DC going through coils to nullify magnetic effects?
Well, if you're going to use any sort of electrical input into your unit or device, just based on our experience, DC is closer to not blocking an etheric pathway than alternating than AC is. The other thing is, and if you can, absolutely avoid like 60 cycles per second and anything that's like conventional. Like plugging something in, running an electromagnetic coil or whatever it is at regular frequencies is not going to help your etheric input. And it's ironic, isn't it, that our whole system is built on something that essentially works against our evolution. It works against our physiology. It works against the input of etheric energy into our beings and our lives. But that's why if you can use pulsed DC like he was doing, then you can change the pulse rate and you can hit harmonics that tend to encourage an etheric response. And then your COP will just go up, 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 up. And I mean, there's lots of, you guys are very familiar with, there's all kinds of different coil shapes that you can utilize that will give you, like, and Tesla did the same thing, that will give you a heightened response. But it's what you're running through those coils that becomes extremely important. And so that's why pulsing DC through those coils is so much more effective than just taking like your typical like power supply system that runs on AC 60 volts per second and then just firing up a coil. It's very difficult to get a true etheric connection with that type of system from our experience. So.
Matt, you got any question? You're the one who brought Kevin. Thank you. Thanks to you. Can't hear you. You're muted. Okay.
Yes. I don't have any questions. No. I'm just perplexed about the talk. Kind of every time I watch a video of yours, Kevin, I soak it in and then I watch it again and then it's just absorbing the knowledge. It's so advanced knowledge and
yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I could listen to you all day and so
we can listen to Kevin forever.
You guys, I'm serious. I don't get an ounce of credit for any of this knowledge. I'm telling you, we didn't work painstakingly hard to develop any of this. Okay, this was revelation. This was downloads. This was like beings teaching us. I mean, we're like barely understanding what the hell they were saying. And it's so funny that like with Tom talking about encoded speech, so much of what they gave us was encoded speech that I'm sure of it, there's so much depth to what we were given that we haven't even tapped yet because we're not ready to tap it yet. Our consciousness isn't there. It's too dangerous. And they even told us there's only so much we can let you know right now because you're not ready. You'll abuse what we're saying. And so I get zero credit for developing any of this. Like zero. I'm serious. It's just we're just trying to ride the wave and not get killed by this wave and keep our surfboard on top of the water, man. That's all we're trying to do without dying through the process.
Oh yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Encoded speech is like a magician, speech. Merlin. Casting
like
spells.
Yeah, and it's like the Bible code stuff, like where there's hidden messages. It's encoded speech, so it works at like multiple levels of consciousness, and it will all reveal more as we learn in more consciousness. It's very bizarre. So there's messages between the words and the letters that we haven't even begun to unravel yet.
Absolutely. Henrik, you got any questions? No.
Oh, this is very complicated. I've just listened, but
it's fascinating. Hey, John?
Fascinating, absolutely.
I know it is. John, you were going to ask a question just now. I interrupted. Sorry about that.
No, it's brilliant. No, excellent, Kevin. Thank you. Yeah, fully resonating with what you were saying. You basically like you're creating like Stargate energy, and you know, talking about the vortex of the connection with the ionosphere and to the center, you know, of the planet. It's amazing creating the torus field into like a Stargate. I think that's what our consciousness has been bringing in, that because the Nazis were digging up there was stargates on the planet that the Nazis were unearthing that would have come out and been activated for the rest of the masses to expand the consciousness. And I think that had been, they tried to stop the ascension. And obviously, like the information you've been shared by the beings, I've had some interactions myself with, you know, galactics throughout my life. So yeah, some of my stuff with the geometry on the pyramids and the pentagonal stuff, and you know, the tridecagon, and part of it is the geometry of the expansion of water on a higher density. So it'd be interesting to share some data at some point, because I'm sure I've hit on something, because it embodies the equilateral triangles and the spin of the DNA to create the Merkabahs behind you. The two tetrahedrons interlocked. Mine's is the two pentagonal, and it's called Michaela. It's 528 frequency. And I was also interested in when you were talking about around the 32 kilohertz, which is around the frequency of clear quartz crystal.
I'm going to share. I'll share something with you guys, since you're working on this stuff, that you can do, okay? Because I was given this vision of exactly what you were saying. As we start to go through this ascension and the magnetic technology comes out, people are going to tap into gates, energy gates, stargates all over the world. And there'll be technology at those gates that will enhance those gates and use those gates for transportation, communication, etc. Exactly how you're saying it. So one of the things that the devices do is they intentionally create three-dimensional fields that mirror sacred geometry, like you're saying. So a simple example of that would be, let's say you have a spinning ring of magnets and you have 6 coils around those, okay? And you could even go up to 12 or whatever. You will pulse you'll pulse every other coil. So like you'll do a sequence of 3 in one direction, pulsing DC, and then you will do a harmonic of that DC frequency on the other 3 in the other direction. Okay, so you're intentionally creating like a bimodal, like a counter-rotating pulsing fields that then the torus, you got to imagine that the torus adjusts to the fields that you create. So every torus is slightly different. There's very few toruses like the ones in the graphics that are perfectly round. They will adjust to frequencies, and certain parts of that, the math of that torus, will be accented. So it will start to form like a 3-dimensional tetrahedron setup. So there'll be points of it that are highlighted, and those points are additional points of incursion and excursion from the etheric that when they pulse, they produce certain effects, and they have certain, so like they'll tap certain like purposes more efficiently, if that makes sense. So there's like because certain geometry likes to produce light, certain geometry likes to produce motion, certain geometry and pulse rates likes to produce replication of matter, certain geometry likes to generate matter, certain geometries likes to tap other systems like outside of our system. So you know what I'm saying? So it's always you're thinking in terms of your magnet configuration and your coil configuration and how that will manifest 3-dimensional sacred geometrical patterns. So it just, if you start to think that way, then you'll go, okay, I got it. Yeah. Now we're going to have a rotating magnetic field, a rotating ring of magnets. We're going to have a counter rotating that's going the other way at a harmonic that's lower than that. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pulse the coils exactly the same type of way, and we're going to create this connection between the magnets and the coils that is so interdimensional. And this is mind-blowing. When we were given the circuitry of like our different devices, like the cold fusion device, the Magnogen, like the engine, when we were given that circuitry, and my dad and I, and the incredible pattern and detail and the ability of the circuitry to redistribute random energy through the ether and form it into sacred geometrical patterns is so stunning. It's other dimensional. I mean, it's from higher beings that have such a grasp of the technology and what we're doing with it, what we need to do with it. It's really quite mind-blowing. And so it's the same thing that you're saying, just always think about what are the three-dimensional energy patterns that we're going to create with this device. Because if we create the proper device and we pulse it, we will tap the etheric. There's no question about it. So I guess that's it for today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. I think James has a question, right, James? Because
Hello.
you got
Yeah,
a
so
whole chat.
quick question. So apparently airplanes don't they basically have free energy, and so these jet engines pull in compressed air to create a vortex. So they would need jet fuel to get off the ground, but to actually fly, they're using a form of free energy. So somebody calculated how long, like for instance, it would take like 14 elephants worth of gasoline is what they're basically stating the actual official specs for these certain airliners. And then if you look at how long it takes to fill the gasoline or the jet fuel inside the wings, it's going in the wings, it would take 7 hours, but these jets are only filling up fuel for about 45 minutes. So they're basically lying to us about that. So I was just curious, do you have any information on where do you think the energy is actually coming out, or rather inside the vortex?
Well, so as soon as the vortex and the jet engine hits a certain frequency, and now there's a different type of technology, it would be called like a magnetic ramjet engine. And it's the same type of principle as what they're using, though. When you have a degree of compression, and then you have a vortex in that, and so you're combining compression and you're combining a vortex. As soon as you get down to that point, now they have additional energy, essentially, that increases the efficiency tremendously of the engine, way beyond what we would think of as like just simply burning jet fuel. And so no, I'm in agreement that, and the reason is because the people that developed it weren't stupid. And when they had that design, they also knew of other designs similar to like our designs, where if you compress and you have magnetic fields, and they have there's magnetic fields in there, but you have compression, you hit that certain like rotational speed. As soon as you get down to where the jet engine is pulling through into that center point, all of a sudden you're tapping etheric energy, and they're hitting molecules. So like, you're hitting everything in the air, and that compression has a magnetic response to it. There's a molecular tension, and part of it's an electrical expression, but it's a molecular tension between that. And so when they hit a certain frequency, you start to unravel the additional energy that's happening in all the molecules that are just being forced into that process. Now, the magnetic thing would be different because you would essentially attract energy. You wouldn't be forcing it through. You would attract the energy in. So you'd have like a magnetic ramjet that creates a torus around your vehicle, and then you attract to whatever destination it is, or you attract to the space in front of you. So it's like truly magnetic, like a UFO, essentially. It's like a UFO where they'll have counterbalancing rotating fields that like they feed off of each other. So there's no conflict, but as they balance each other, they can create tremendous forward motion, side motion, upward motion, any motion that they want. And then the occupants inside feel absolutely nothing because they have another encasing of their own gravity field that is completely independent of what's happening outside of them. So that's the UFO technology that is, no question about it, the government's had it for a long time. They've had it for a long time.
Just to wrap this up, on the jet engine question that was just asked, basically, what are you sucking in? What particles are you sucking in mass at that altitude? Water.
Well, exactly. Water vapor. Not only that, but they're getting into a level like when you get up into the cruising altitude and you're like at that, 5 mile or whatever, you're getting into more charged particles. There's an increase in charged particles at that point. So you're starting to tap ions. And as soon as you start to tap the lower part of the ion field, oh my God, there's no telling how much energy you can do when you start compressing and put that in a vortex. Now you've got ionic energy that is very highly charged particles that you can put to use in that system. So yeah, you got water vapor and ions. I mean, come on. Yeah.
Back to you, Crystal. Thank you so very much.
Oh, we forgot Billy. Billy, you got anything to ask Kevin? Billy, can you unmute yourself unless you're not there? Right. Okay. Right. So there being no other business now, the second session of our 119th FESIG meeting is now adjourned to the 200th meeting, which is on which date now, Pontus? The new year?
3rd of January.
January what?
The 3rd.
Huh? I can't hear you. Sorry.
The 3rd.
The 3rd.
The 3rd. Please pen
Yeah.
down in your diary, please, everyone, so you won't miss the meeting. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you all
You're
so much.
awesome. We love everything that you say. Every word is just so spot on. We want to hear.
Hi, Crystal. This is Billy. I was just stepped out of the room. Did I hear my name?
Yeah, I asked if you would have anything to put to Kevin that you need to know.
Thanks,
Some
Kevin,
answers
for an
for you.
awesome presentation. I just was wondering, what's your best website, and also is any of the technology or units available?
I'll
No,
put a link to his
she'll
name.
link it. I have a couple different sites out there, and then the YouTube thing. We are not selling anything at this time. Now, part of the reason we're not selling anything at this time is because last time we started selling kits, the lab was completely destroyed, and my close friend and business partner is gone.
Oh.
So
sad.
there's a bit of suppression there, but it's not, I don't want to blame that. I really want to say it's the higher guidance is the better reason. So at this point, anything has to be under IP contract and only being field tested under specific contracts. That cannot be, so nothing can be sold publicly, and that keeps me safe and that keeps everyone involved safe. And it's okay to do that, and it's okay to gather data. Now, as soon as things can become available, obviously we're going to do it. Is, because I would certainly love the freedom to be able to make money from this, but that's really not my guidance at this point. So
Is the
Very
magnetic
wise.
energy future.com one of the websites?
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah.
Okay. I was just seeing you had some different pictures and drawings on there.
Yeah, there's some different stuff on there, and it's a lot of it's kind of kept so you can't develop anything very easily from that site. So if you guys decide you're going to work on something, let me know, and then I will try to help you, because it's I don't want my site to get shut down again like it was before, and I got screamed at and yelled at and everything, and so it's all kind of dumbed down, but that's okay. It's still valuable information. It's still, it is what it is. It is what it is right now, and it's okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've just adjourned the meeting. Oh, sorry, Lassa, Karen, Kenneth, and Will, because I have reserved all the Q&A session for the members of the R&D team only. Okay, thank you so much for attending this meeting, folks, all of you. And most of all, our gratitude to Kevin for sharing his knowledge. Namaste. And stop recording now. Thank you.